Captain Maya Rodriguez thought her nightmare was over when she survived Afghanistan and came home with her service dog Atlas. But when she was sentenced to death for murdering her commanding officer, it was Atlas who refused to give up, and his determination to protect his handler would uncover a conspiracy that went to the highest levels of military command. The Montgomery County Courthouse stood like a fortress of justice in downtown Clarksville, Tennessee, its limestone columns and brass fixtures reflecting the gravity of the proceedings within. Courtroom 3A buzzed with tension as reporters, military personnel, and curious civilians packed the gallery for the sentencing of one of the most controversial cases in recent memory. The air conditioning struggled against the summer heat and the collective anxiety of those present, while fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the faces of people who had come to witness either justice or tragedy. Depending on their perspective on the guilt or innocence of the woman sitting at the defendant's table, Captain Maya Rodriguez sat rigidly in her wheelchair, her military bearing intact despite the orange jumpsuit that had replaced her dress uniform. At 31, she carried herself with the dignity of someone who had served her country with distinction, though the prosthetic leg hidden beneath her pants and the slight tremor in her hands told the story of sacrifices made in foreign lands. Her dark eyes, which had once scanned Afghan mountainsides for threats, now focused on the judge who would determine whether she lived or died. Beside her wheelchair lay Atlas, a German shepherd whose intelligent brown eyes missed nothing as he maintained his position as her service dog. Despite the courtroom setting, the bond between Maya and Atlas was visible to anyone who understood the relationship between veterans and the animals that helped them navigate civilian life after combat. Atlas had been trained to detect the onset of Maya's PTSD episodes, provide stability when phantom pain from her missing leg became overwhelming, and serve as a constant reminder that she was no longer alone in a hostile environment. What the packed courtroom didn't understand was that Atlas possessed capabilities beyond his official training, an intuitive understanding of human behavior, and an unshakable loyalty that would prove crucial in the days to come. Maya's conviction for the murder of Colonel James Westfield had been built on evidence that seemed overwhelming: her fingerprints on the murder weapon, her blood at the crime scene, and security footage placing her car near Westfield's home on the night of his death. The prosecution had painted her as a bitter veteran, seeking revenge against the commanding officer who had allegedly denied her medical leave and contributed to the injuries that ended her military career. But the evidence that had convicted her was about to be challenged by the one witness who had never been allowed to testify, her service dog, whose instincts would expose a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of military command. The decision that would ultimately save Maya's life came not from her legal team or family, but from Atlas himself, whose refusal to accept his handler's imprisonment triggered a series of events that would expose the truth behind Colonel Westfield's murder. In the days following Maya's sentencing, Atlas exhibited behavior that concerned everyone who knew him: refusing food, becoming increasingly agitated, and showing signs of distress that went beyond normal separation anxiety. Maya's father, retired Sergeant Major Carlos Rodriguez, recognized that Atlas's behavior was more than grief over Maya's absence. The dog's training had taught him to detect threats and protect his handler, and his continued agitation suggested that he sensed danger that others couldn't perceive. Carlos's decision to trust Atlas's instincts rather than dismiss them as animal emotion would prove crucial to uncovering the conspiracy that had framed his daughter. The breakthrough came when Atlas led Carlos to Maya's apartment and began exhibiting the same alert behavior he had shown during their military service when detecting improvised explosive devices. His focused attention on specific areas of the apartment suggested that he was detecting something that human investigators had missed during their searches. Carlos's plan was based on his understanding of both Atlas's capabilities and the systematic approach that military investigations required. His years of experience as a senior NCO had taught him that complex problems required methodical analysis, and that overlooking details could have fatal consequences. Working with Maya's public defender, Sarah Chen, Carlos began a comprehensive review of the evidence while allowing Atlas to guide their investigation. The plan required them to retrace Maya's movements on the day of the murder while paying attention to Atlas's reactions to different locations and pieces of evidence. The dog's training in explosive detection had given him an extraordinary sense of smell and an ability to distinguish between different chemical signatures that could reveal evidence that traditional forensic techniques had missed. Chen's legal expertise combined with Carlos's military experience and Atlas's unique capabilities created an investigative team that approached the case from angles that the original investigation had never considered. Their goal was not just to find evidence of Maya's innocence, but to identify the real perpetrator and expose the motive that had led to Westfield's murder and Maya's framing. The investigation's first breakthrough came when Atlas led Carlos and Chen to Maya's bedroom closet, where he began exhibiting the same alert behavior that had indicated the presence of explosives during their deployment. His focused attention on a specific area of the closet led to the discovery of a hidden GPS tracking device that had been monitoring Maya's movements for weeks before the murder. The device, sophisticated and military-grade, suggested that someone with access to advanced surveillance equipment had been tracking Maya's daily routine and movements. More importantly, the data stored on the device contradicted the prosecution's timeline and showed that Maya had not been at Westfield's house during the estimated time of death. Chen's analysis of the GPS data revealed that Maya had been at a veteran support group meeting across town when the murder occurred, providing an alibi that had been overlooked because Maya's PTSD-related memory issues had prevented her from clearly recalling her activities on that evening. The discovery of the tracking device also suggested that someone had been planning to frame Maya for the murder well in advance. The evidence was compelling, but it also raised disturbing questions about who had the resources and motivation to conduct such sophisticated surveillance and orchestrate such an elaborate frame-up. Atlas's continued investigation led the team to Maya's garage, where his alert behavior focused on a duffel bag that had been overlooked during the original search. The bag contained Maya's running shoes from the day of the murder, and forensic analysis revealed that they showed no traces of the distinctive gravel from Westfield's driveway gravel that should have been present if she had actually been at the crime scene as the prosecution claimed. The absence of physical evidence on Maya's shoes was significant because the prosecution had argued that she had walked up Westfield's gravel driveway to confront him at his front door. The pristine condition of her shoes, combined with the GPS data showing her location across town, created serious doubt about the prosecution's version of events. But Atlas's most important discovery came when he led the team to Maya's computer, where his alert behavior indicated the presence of something that human investigators had missed. Chen's examination of the computer revealed hidden files that Maya had encrypted before her arrest files, containing financial records that showed discrepancies in military contracts that Westfield had been investigating before his death. The financial record suggested that Westfield's murder might have been motivated by his discovery of corruption, rather than any personal conflict with Maya. The team's discoveries attracted the attention of Special Agent Lisa Park from the Army Criminal Investigation Division, who had been conducting a parallel investigation into military contract fraud that overlapped with the evidence Chen and Carlos had uncovered. Park's investigation had identified several senior officers who were suspected of skimming funds from reconstruction contracts, and Westfield's name had appeared in her files as someone who had been asking questions about financial irregularities. Park's willingness to share information with Maya's defense team was based on her recognition that the murder case and the contract fraud investigation were connected. The timing of Westfield's death, coming just days before he was scheduled to testify before a military oversight committee about financial irregularities, suggested that his murder was intended to silence him rather than settle any personal grievance. Atlas's role in uncovering the evidence impressed Park, who had worked with military working dogs during her own deployment and understood their capabilities. Her decision to include Atlas in the official investigation was unprecedented, but reflected her understanding that the dog's unique abilities could reveal evidence that traditional forensic techniques might miss. The collaboration between civilian defense attorneys, military investigators, and a service dog created an unusual but effective investigative team. The breakthrough that would ultimately exonerate Maya came when Atlas led the team to a dumpster behind a military surplus store, where his alert behavior indicated the presence of evidence that had been discarded by the real perpetrator. The discovery of a blood-stained military jacket hidden in the dumpster provided DNA evidence that would identify the actual murderer and expose the conspiracy that had framed Maya. Forensic analysis of the jacket revealed blood from both Westfield and an unknown individual, suggesting that the real killer had been injured during the murder and had disposed of evidence that could link him to the crime. The jacket's size and style indicated that it belonged to a male officer, contradicting the prosecution's theory that Maya had committed the murder alone. But the most damning evidence came from the jacket's name tape, which had been partially removed but still showed enough letters to identify Major Philip Garrison, the officer who had taken over Westfield's position after his death. Garrison's access to Maya's personal information, his knowledge of her daily routine, and his motive to silence Westfield's investigation into contract fraud made him the prime suspect in both the murder and the frame-up. The evidence against Garrison was compelling, but proving his guilt while exonerating Maya required careful coordination between multiple agencies and the presentation of complex evidence that would convince both military and civilian authorities. Special Agent Park's investigation into contract fraud provided the motive, while the physical evidence discovered through Atlas's alerts provided the means and opportunity. The challenge was presenting the evidence in a way that would not only free Maya, but also ensure that Garrison and his co-conspirators faced appropriate consequences for their crimes. The conspiracy involved multiple officers and civilian contractors who had been stealing millions of dollars from reconstruction projects, and Westfield's murder was just one element of a broader pattern of corruption and violence. Atlas's continued involvement in the investigation was crucial because his alerts had led to evidence that traditional forensic techniques had missed. His ability to detect trace amounts of explosives, blood, and other chemical signatures made him an invaluable asset in uncovering evidence that had been carefully concealed by sophisticated criminals. The final phase of the investigation would require Atlas to guide investigators to additional evidence, while Maya's legal team prepared for the legal battle that would determine whether justice would finally be served. The crisis that nearly derailed Maya's exoneration came when Major Garrison, realizing that the investigation was closing in on him, attempted to eliminate the evidence and witnesses that could expose his crimes. His decision to break into Maya's apartment to retrieve any remaining evidence led to a confrontation with Atlas that would provide the final proof of his guilt and demonstrate the dog's unwavering loyalty to his handler. Garrison's entry into the apartment triggered Atlas's protective instincts, and the ensuing struggle left the Major with bite wounds that would match DNA evidence found at Westfield's crime scene. But more importantly, Garrison's presence in Maya's apartment while she was in prison provided irrefutable proof that he had been involved in planting evidence and orchestrating her frame-up. The confrontation was witnessed by neighbors who called police, leading to Garrison's arrest and the discovery of additional evidence that he had been attempting to destroy. His possession of Maya's personal items, including her service medals and photographs, demonstrated his intimate knowledge of her background and his role in using that knowledge to frame her for murder. But the most damning evidence came from Atlas himself, whose aggressive reaction to Garrison's presence was so intense that it convinced even skeptical observers that the dog recognized him as a threat to Maya's safety. The bond between service dog and handler had led Atlas to identify the real perpetrator even when human investigators had been deceived by carefully planted evidence. The climactic moment in Maya's case came during an emergency hearing where Special Agent Park presented the evidence that Atlas had helped uncover, while Garrison's attorney attempted to discredit the investigation by arguing that a dog's behavior couldn't be used as evidence in a criminal proceeding. The legal battle over Atlas's role in the investigation highlighted the complex relationship between traditional forensic evidence and the unique capabilities of trained animals. Judge Patricia Williams, who had originally sentenced Maya to death, found herself reviewing evidence that completely contradicted the prosecution's case and raised serious questions about the integrity of the original investigation. The GPS data, the forensic analysis of Maya's shoes, the financial records showing Garrison's motive, and the physical evidence linking him to the crime scene created an overwhelming case for Maya's innocence. But the most compelling evidence was Atlas's consistent behavior throughout the investigation, his alerts at specific locations, his aggressive reaction to Garrison's presence, and his unwavering focus on evidence that human investigators had missed, the dog's training and proven reliability in detecting explosives and other threats gave credibility to his role in uncovering the truth about Westfield's murder. This court has reviewed evidence that was not available during the original trial. Judge Williams announced to the packed courtroom evidence that calls into question not only the defendant's guilt, but the integrity of the investigation that led to her conviction. The judge's words carried the weight of judicial authority, but they also reflected her understanding that the justice system had failed Maya Rodriguez and that extraordinary measures were required to correct that failure. The turning point came when Judge Williams ordered Maya's immediate release pending a complete review of her case, while simultaneously ordering the arrest of Major Garrison on charges of murder, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. The dramatic reversal, coming just days before Maya's scheduled execution, demonstrated the power of persistent investigation and the importance of never giving up on the truth. Maya's reunion with Atlas in the courtroom was emotional and powerful, providing visual evidence of the bond that had motivated the dog's relentless pursuit of evidence that would exonerate his handler. The sight of the disabled veteran embracing her service dog while surrounded by the evidence that had freed her created a moment of profound justice that resonated with everyone present. But the victory was tempered by the realization that Maya had come within days of being executed for a crime she didn't commit, highlighting the fallibility of the justice system and the importance of thorough investigation and competent defense representation. The case would become a landmark example of how wrongful convictions could be overturned when dedicated advocates refused to accept convenient conclusions and pursued evidence wherever it led. The formal exoneration of Maya Rodriguez required extensive legal proceedings that involved military and civilian authorities working together to address the complex web of corruption and conspiracy that had led to her wrongful conviction. Special Agent Park's investigation into military contract fraud expanded to include dozens of officers and civilian contractors who had been involved in the scheme that Westfield had discovered and that had motivated his murder. The preparation phase included comprehensive forensic reanalysis of all evidence from the original case, with particular attention to items that Atlas had identified as significant. The dog's alerts had led investigators to evidence that traditional forensic techniques had missed, demonstrating the value of incorporating trained animals into criminal investigations. Maya's legal team worked with military prosecutors to ensure that all charges against her were dismissed and that she received appropriate compensation for her wrongful imprisonment and near execution. The case had attracted national attention and highlighted the challenges faced by disabled veterans in the civilian justice system, leading to calls for reform and better training for law enforcement and legal professionals. The collaboration between civilian and military authorities in Maya's case became a model for how complex cases involving military personnel could be handled more effectively in the future. Despite the overwhelming evidence of her innocence and the arrest of the real perpetrators, Maya experienced moments of uncertainty about her ability to rebuild her life after spending months on death row for a crime she didn't commit. The psychological trauma of wrongful conviction and near execution had compounded her existing PTSD, creating new challenges that would require ongoing support and treatment. Her concerns were both practical and emotional practical, because she needed to rebuild her reputation and find new purpose after her military career had been destroyed by false accusations. And emotional, because the betrayal by fellow officers had shattered her trust in institutions and people she had once respected. But Atlas's unwavering loyalty and the support of advocates who had fought for her freedom provided Maya with the foundation she needed to begin healing and moving forward. The bond with her service dog had literally saved her life and would continue to provide stability as she navigated the challenges of rebuilding her civilian life. The formal ceremony marking Maya's exoneration took place at Fort Campbell, where she had once served with distinction before her deployment to Afghanistan. The event was attended by military officials, legal advocates, and media representatives who had followed her case from conviction to vindication. The pressure of public attention was intense for Maya, who had spent months in isolation on death row and was still adjusting to her freedom. Atlas remained by her side throughout the ceremony, his presence providing the stability and support that had sustained Maya through her darkest moments. The dog's role in uncovering the evidence that had freed her was acknowledged by speakers who praised his loyalty and the unique contribution that service animals could make to criminal investigations. The ceremony also served as an opportunity to address the broader issues raised by Maya's case, including the need for better support for disabled veterans and reforms to prevent similar wrongful convictions in the future. The challenge of Maya's reintegration into civilian life was complicated by the media attention and public interest in her case, which made it difficult for her to find the privacy and quiet that she needed to heal from her traumatic experiences. The transition from death row to freedom was jarring and required careful management to prevent additional psychological damage. Her legal team worked to protect her privacy while ensuring that her story could serve as an example for other wrongfully convicted individuals and their advocates. The balance between public interest and personal healing was delicate and required ongoing attention from everyone involved in her support network. Atlas's presence provided continuity and stability during this difficult transition. His training and intuitive understanding of Maya's needs helping her navigate the challenges of rebuilding her life while dealing with ongoing PTSD and the trauma of wrongful conviction. The climactic moment of Maya's vindication came when she was presented with a formal apology from the Army and offered reinstatement to active duty with full honors and back pay. The offer represented official acknowledgment of the injustice she had suffered and recognition of her continued value as a military officer, despite the false accusations that had destroyed her career. But Maya's response surprised many observers when she declined the offer of reinstatement, choosing instead to pursue a new career as an advocate for wrongfully convicted veterans and disabled service members. Her decision reflected her understanding that her experience, while traumatic, had given her unique insights into the challenges faced by vulnerable veterans in the civilian justice system. "I'm grateful for the Army's offer," Maya said during her acceptance speech, "but I believe I can serve my fellow veterans better by working to prevent what happened to me from happening to others. Atlas and I have found a new mission, and we're committed to seeing it through." Her decision to become an advocate rather than return to military service demonstrated the personal growth and resilience that had carried her through her ordeal and positioned her to help others facing similar challenges. The ceremony concluded with Maya and Atlas walking together across the parade ground where she had once trained as a young officer, their bond stronger than ever despite the trials they had endured. The sight of the disabled veteran and her service dog moving with purpose and dignity provided a powerful symbol of resilience and the unbreakable connection between humans and the animals that serve alongside them. As they reached the end of the parade ground, Maya knelt beside Atlas and embraced the dog who had saved her life through his unwavering loyalty and determination to uncover the truth. "Good boy," she whispered, her voice carrying across the quiet field. "You brought me home." And the moment captured the essence of their relationship and the extraordinary journey that had led from wrongful conviction to vindication, demonstrating that sometimes the most important witnesses are the ones who can't speak, but whose actions speak louder than any words. Maya's exoneration led to immediate changes in how military criminal investigations were conducted, with new protocols for incorporating service animals into evidence gathering and requirements for more thorough investigation of cases involving disabled veterans. The conspiracy that had led to her framing was exposed in its entirety, resulting in court-martial proceedings for multiple officers and civilian contractors who had been involved in the contract fraud scheme. Major Garrison was convicted of murder and conspiracy, receiving a life sentence that reflected the severity of his crimes and the betrayal of his oath as a military officer. The financial fraud investigation led to the recovery of millions of dollars that had been stolen from reconstruction projects and reforms to prevent similar corruption in the future. Atlas became a symbol of the unique contributions that service animals could make to criminal justice, with his story inspiring new research into the use of trained dogs in forensic investigations. His loyalty to Maya and his role in uncovering the truth made him a hero in the veteran community and beyond. Maya's case became a landmark example of wrongful conviction and the importance of thorough investigation and competent defense representation. Her advocacy work led to the establishment of new support programs for disabled veterans facing criminal charges and reforms to ensure that their unique needs were understood and addressed by the justice system. The collaboration between civilian and military authorities in her case became a model for handling complex cases involving military personnel, while the role of Atlas in uncovering evidence led to new protocols for incorporating service animals into criminal investigations. Maya's story inspired legislation that strengthened protections for disabled veterans and provided additional resources for their legal defense. Most importantly, her experience demonstrated the power of persistence and the importance of never giving up on the truth. Even when faced with overwhelming evidence and institutional pressure to accept convenient conclusions rather than pursue justice. 5 years after her exoneration, Maya stood before a group of law students at Georgetown University, with Atlas lying quietly beside her as she shared her story and the lessons it had taught her about justice, perseverance, and the unbreakable bonds between humans and animals. Her work as an advocate had helped dozens of wrongfully convicted veterans, while her partnership with Atlas had evolved into a new kind of service that honored their shared commitment to protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. "Atlas saved my life," she told the students, not just by uncovering evidence, but by never giving up on me when everyone else had. That's what justice looks like, someone who refuses to stop fighting for the truth.